Welcome to Three Witches and a Druid podcast, a Canadian podcast about paganism in today's modern society.
Welcome back to Three Witches and a Druid, where we sit around a kitchen table and talk about modern paganism. I'm Margot.
And I'm Maeve.
I'm Gwen.
I'm Brian.
And tonight we are talking about gatekeeping. What it is, why it can be harmful, and why occasionally it can be necessary.
So the Urban Dictionary defines gatekeeping as when someone takes it upon themselves to decide who does or does not have access or rights to a community or identity. So this has been a problem since the 50s in paganism. A lot of people in the witchcraft community felt that initiation was a requirement to be a witch.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, now in 2020, that's a pretty far-fetched concept.
It is.
This is kind of making a bit of a comeback due to social media like TikTok and Instagram, where you have individuals who are touting themselves as gurus of witchcraft, feel that you need to pay them a $5 a month fee and they'll teach you all they know of witchcraft. So it's slightly coming back. So what are some of the personal experiences each of us have had with gatekeeping?
I think you should start. I think you've got the best stories.
My gatekeeping, and I'm of two minds about gatekeeping. In some places I do feel that a bit of gatekeeping, to make sure that people are not, gonna come on in and set themselves up so they can, corner young witches into whatever they want them to do. I do believe in a bit, with people's intentions, but I tend to, on the whole, be very wide open. So long as you're respectful of the tradition and you research the tradition and it resonates with you. I'm very eclectic because my first experiences in an organized coven, and we are talking 25 years ago, long time. The people who ran this group, they figured they were your lords and masters, basically, in many ways. There was no say on who got to join. They decided. You had no say. It was always overtures, inappropriate ones sometimes, and it was also, well, we've disassociated with this person. If you talk to them, you're not allowed to come around with us. It was really a lot of it even I was going, no. So I didn't stay too long with them. A year maybe, because I said, no, I'm terribly sorry, I'm not living like that. So when I did get out of that, did leave that group, I said get out, it's not get out. I wasn't in a cult trap somewhere, anything like that. But when I did leave that group, I tended to go way in the other direction. Way.
Which is a very you thing to do.
It was. And it was also, and I gotta say, we'll give our credit to good old Scott Cunningham, who in the 90s wrote Solitary Practitioner and all that. You weren't a witch unless somebody gave you an initiation, and everyone was desperate to belong to a group, some sort of BTW group or whatever the case might have been, so you could have initiation, recognition, and you felt you'd accomplished things, and finding a teacher was a big deal. So there was a little bit more, there wasn't much choice, and there was a little more frantic desperation almost about it. But then everyone read Scott Cunningham and went, oh, good, we're free. You know what I mean? And so I went very much the other direction. And there is a lot of people with, why are you as a European-based ancestry? I mean, I'm a Canadian. My family came here, a long time ago. Why would you want to, have one of my goddesses is an Indian goddess, Kali. You're not Indian. Well, so what? I respect Kali. I respect their culture. I've done a lot of reading. I've done a lot of work. And I also, too, believe, and this is an argument some people might not go for, but there is residue from life to life.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe one of the reasons why I'm very drawn to Kali is 3 lives ago, maybe I was in India, living in India. I've often thought that. One of my past lives, I was definitely a Roman, and Diana And, and another goddess of mine is Kuan Yin, and maybe I was Chinese. Just because I'm white European descent now doesn't mean I've always been white European descent. So that can really resonate with someone, I think. So when people say, oh, you can't do that, yes, but maybe it's your soul affiliation. Since I was 4 years old, I wanted to go to Egypt. I wanted to be an Egyptologist when I was younger. And though I don't work with their pantheon, ancient Egypt and all of that just absolutely still to this day awes and fascinates me. And I was having my palm read by a friend of ours, and she does soul affiliations in your palm. And several years ago, she said, you're an Egyptian in your soul affiliation. Am I answering the question of your question? That's one of my thoughts. But no, truly, as far as gatekeeping goes, I also do gatekeep just for safety's sake and all of that. But you go do what you want. No one's going to tell me, I'm sorry, you're not Indian. You can't put a Kali fridge magnet on in your kitchen. They can, my middle fingers for that. So.
Well, to stay on that topic a little bit, there's the history books show us that Isis was worshipped by Romans, and we have Bridget in Christianity, and she was originally a Celtic goddess. So deity sharing may not always be necessarily appropriate, but it's definitely happened, and no one can ever deny that it hasn't happened for hundreds of years.
It's a little bit of hubris on our parts that we draw boxes around deity. Who are we to say who deity resonates and speaks to? Maybe I don't assume authority over a culture or a tradition that I have no knowledge of. But if deity speaks to me and I want to learn and so that I know how to respond, I should not feel that I'm inappropriate in responding.
Oh, that's the key point there, is the wanting to learn about it. It's not like you're taking a god from another culture and just stamping it on the side of a candle and trying to sell it. This is something you're interested in, something you're wanting to learn and grow with. Mm-hmm. That's part of it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. Recently, I was doing a little research because I love research. I'm a dig the research out girl, especially when it comes to deities. I love researching gods and goddesses and mythologies and all of that. And recently, because I'm at that just over 50 perimenopausal children, child leaving high school, getting ready, becoming independent. And I'm like, maybe I'm having a little thinking about empty nest and things. And a goddess came to me, a deity that I would have never gone for in 1,000 years. And she's what came to me. So who am I to turn her away if she was there to help me?
Yeah.
And that will help me. Who cares? I do understand from what you were saying before we started that in the online community and culture, gatekeeping is needed a little more in some ways, or is happening maybe in a oppressive way or something.
What's your personal experience with gatekeeping first?
My personal experience, well, I think I've kind of seen in small circles. I have been involved in some small circles where when people understood that you were doing certain work, that they had an expectation that other religious institutions like a church, that it would be an open door and they could just walk in whenever they wanted. And often because of the deeply personal nature of witchcraft and how people express it in their lives and use it, it's not safe for people. And maybe people have different expectations of what they're going to experience or go through. And so sometimes people say, oh, that's really good, you're working on this or that or whatever. It comes out because it was never something that would be common knowledge or something like that. But if it comes out, I'm really interested. I've been doing this work. Do you think I could be a part of that group? Or do you think, are you accepting new members? Those sorts of things. And then it would be a group decision. This person seems to be walking a similar path to us. We can help her and she can help us. But then there are other people that maybe it's a feather in their cap if they can be part of specific groups, or they have different expectations and it's just not going to be helpful for either of you. So you think, have you tried this group or that group? They may be accepting new people. And nobody likes rejection. So there's negative feedback. There's people with hurt feelings because they have different expectations. As we're talking, I was just thinking about this. And sometimes the whole gatekeeping thing is interesting because the smaller the group, sometimes the firmer the boundaries. So you go back to the 50s and whatever, they were a very small percentage of population wise. And there was definitely a level of privilege. Like you may have to fly or travel hundreds of miles to maybe meet with your coven because teachers weren't around back then and that sort of thing. And so it's interesting how people in the margins, sometimes you choose gatekeeping to protect yourself or something, or to give yourself self-referential. Or I'm trying to think how that would work. Like you're thinking, people, who really wants to be part of this? We're an alternative, small part of society. I mean, and witchcraft and pagan practices go in and out of fashion. In another cycle, there'll be something else will come to the forefront and capture people's imaginations. There will be people who stay. It seems very interesting to me. We're such a small group, and yet we're very self-regulatory as to who should belong or who's going to be there or who has value. I don't know. Maybe it's more necessary to be careful about things like that because you're in a smaller alternative group, but maybe it's also about creating a structure of self-importance. That us versus them.
Yeah.
It can be interesting because when you lead a public ritual, anyone and everyone is welcome.
Yes.
But it can get tricky because someone might say, oh, I hear you're blah, 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 a part of this coven. Can I come and join up with you? And you're thinking, no.
Yeah.
Not in a cruel way and not in an unpleasant way. But, it's not necessarily just my decision to make.
Yeah.
But it's also, and this is going to sound so snotty, but, it's nice to have the like-minded people. This is what we wish to be doing. This is our goal. This is sort of our focus. And some people just are, as you said, that another group might be better for you. And you do get hurt feelings. It's like, oh, can we join up? Or, that sort of idea. That can get tricky. Now, public rituals, come one, come all.
Mm-hmm.
That's another story. But a lot of times, I remember back in the day, 25 years ago, when there were more groups almost than you thought, but they were so absolutely secret.
Yes.
You had no idea. And it's like, if you did find out about another group and meet some people there, you absolutely didn't say you knew them in many cases. But it was a big matter of, social services could be on their doorstep or their job could be in jeopardy. And that sort of depends on the circumstance. And how does it work, Brian? You were talking about internet?
I don't want to get into it too much because this is practically a whole episode on its own. But on TikTok, over the last little while, someone had told me, you need to download TikTok and look up the hashtag TikTok witches. I'm like, why? And they're like, you'll see. So you download TikTok and you search the hashtag TikTok witches or witch TikTok or something along those lines. And the astronomical amount of individuals who were on there who proclaim that if you pay them $5 a month, they'll teach you everything you need to know about witchcraft. They will be the guru for your exploratory path. And that's another episode about getting paid for services. But at the same time, these people imply that unless you learn from them, you're not going to learn anything. They're pushing this concept that you can't learn on your own. You need this mentor, this person who will initiate you into their craft.
It's interesting because you were talking about cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And this 25 years ago, that's what it was like. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's come back around.
Isn't that interesting?
Which, again, when I worked at Little Mysteries for all those years and had so many people coming in, looking and searching, the really young ones always wanted the really old books. Where are your really old books? Where are the original books? It's like, they were all written in the 50s. There's nothing old. That's the oldest.
Yeah. Little Gerald Gardner.
Yeah.
Little Pickwick Papers.
They also wanted to know about groups and how to find a group and how to be in a group. And I understand that desire for connection and for community, but I also understood a little bit about some of the groups that were active at the time and wanting to let people know that you need to ask questions. Question if anybody offers to be a teacher or wants to invite you into their group, go into it with open eyes, ask questions, and never do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, because it should be a safe place. It should be a healthy place. And if anything is making you squeamish, I guess that's when you use your own personal gatekeeping and decide this is not for me. This is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So do you have any personal experiences with gatekeeping? I assume a lot for the store.
Mostly it was helping people find the answers they were looking for, which most of the time was in books.
Yeah.
Because there's not, at that time, there weren't a lot of teachers around. I mean, Maeve did her courses at the UU Church that we promoted a lot. Vanessa herself would do Wicca 101 courses. And I know...
We used to do the Druid 101.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know through there, quite often, people who didn't have any other connection with each other that was one way people did find each other and start building their own groups.
I'd say that billboard, like just inside the door, was like the main community hub for years.
Yeah, for helping people connect with other people. Yeah.
A lot of the time I found people they didn't feel, oh, I'm reading the book and I'm trying it on my own, but am I doing it right? Am I this? Am I that? They just needed maybe a little guidance, a little validation. It's like, oh gosh, I don't know if I did that right. It's like, no, you did that perfectly.
Or
That
I
was
would always have
wonderful.
people say, I've done the reading, I have my little altar set up, but I'm afraid to call the quarters. I'm afraid to cast a circle. What if I do it wrong? And my favorite response was always, oh honey, the goddess understands. Your intention is right. Your heart is in the right place. One of the appeals of paganism is the lack of rigidity, I think, for a lot of people. It's not you can only do it this way. If you don't do it this way, it's wrong. Which is what a lot of people were fleeing from and finding so unfulfilling.
That's right.
And that's what I was going to mention is like gatekeeping can be a large cultural thing, but it also can be just the incredible minor things. A good example is individuals who might, as I was mentioning earlier, lighting sage and lighting it with a lighter. And some people will be like, no, you're doing that wrong. It needs to be lit with a candle. That's a form of gatekeeping. And with that argument, though, this is kind of my own form of personal gatekeeping. And I understand it comes from a point of privilege. I personally feel that the tools that you use matter. The idea of using tools that were mass-produced in China, made in a sweatshop, I feel that those personal things take away from what you're trying to create. But that's my own personal form of gatekeeping. I wouldn't tell somebody else that they're doing it wrong. But if you have the opportunity to improve quality of what you're doing, then go for it. But I wouldn't say that using the Athame with the China stamp on it, like I wouldn't say you're doing it wrong, but take that into consideration when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing.
My Athame is made in Pakistan.
Yeah, I have a single
I've been using that film for 25 years.
And that's fine. It's like I read a book, I think it was called The Crane Bag. She has a chapter in there and it's about, I think it's actually titled Gatekeeping. And she says, this is my personal form of gatekeeping. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. There's a weird taint to yourself if you're trying to invoke the gods while wearing a cloak made from some little girl in India while waving around the wand made by a little boy in China. It's like, now I understand this comes from a point of privilege, like I can afford to make my own tools or afford to buy something of a higher quality. Not everybody can do that. A lot of people have to buy their candles from the dollar store. There's nothing wrong with that either.
That's okay. You can't get the sheets of beeswax anymore. The colored beeswax like you used to go to Michael's or whatever it is and get.
It's funny you say that because I think that's Karen's biggest complaint because she used to love making those candles.
Oh, I know. You
Can't
put
get
the
them
herbs in them and everything for spell work. It was absolutely perfect. But it is nice, if you can make your, find your own tools in very, very special places. Or even now, you can be so much more connected because we have online, the internet has some good things about it with artisans and things who make these things and whatnot. There was no artisan for me and I couldn't afford to go to a blacksmith. So it was a biker kiosk in the West End Mall where Sears and the Bay used to be. And it was a boot knife and I still use it to this day.
But also in use, you've layered over it.
Oh,
Yes.
You know, in
yes,
creation,
yes.
there's stuff, and those entities carry those energies
and it's been
with them. But
used so much.
use
Yeah.
you know, that layers.
Well,
over.
again, when people would say, I want to buy everything I need for my altar, I'm like, look, I am more than happy to sell you everything.
Yeah.
But if you don't connect with any of the challenges we have, why are you spending your money?
Yeah.
You might be at a flea market and find something
Yes.
that just grabs you, you know?
I can't remember the wording, but I also remember, and it kind of comes up in the same from the store perspective, that as you left Little Mysteries, there was like this kind of sign saying something like, are you sure you want to steal your sacred tools?
Yes.
Because there's also that, right?
Yes.
Like how do you come by your sacred tools? How do you, I guess that's another episode,
Yeah.
the things that you use and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But
Well, I could talk for hours about that. One of my favorite things is thrifting that stuff.
yeah.
Oh, 15.
Yeah, and you know, a little cleansing and a little whatever, and things work really well.
And mixing it up is okay too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people get very worried about, you know, it all has to match this or I was like, no. Well, I got the boot knife from Pakistan, and I also have beautiful like plum orchard pottery made in Nova Scotia, pentacle and chalice. Is, you know, what comes to you, what suits you, and if somebody says, oh, you can't use that, well, again, that's what your middle fingers.
Back to gatekeeping though. Gatekeeping also sometimes, unfortunately, comes hand in hand with cultural appropriation. And a lot of people feeling that you're appropriating a culture if you step too far in any one direction. And then you have people say, no, you can't. You can or cannot do this. How do we feel about this?
Intention, respect. I work with chaplains of various faiths, and I was speaking to one of my good buddies is a Mennonite chaplain in New Brunswick, and he from time to time will use a Indigenous person stories from their local area in his sermons, but he has a good relationship with that community and gets permission. I'm using it in this way. Is that okay? He talks to the elders and he gets that permission. He's using it in that way. I don't see maybe appropriating stuff from other cultures in that same way that, you know, that he is, but that idea of if you are drawn to a certain path that is really outside of your wheelhouse in your cultural knowledge base, because we are raised in this Western way, it is not wrong to seek out teachers of different cultures, whether it's the Caribbean blacks and the Vodun and Santeria that grew up there, or many other things. I don't think that's wrong. And I find, especially here in this country, I find the First Nations people so generous with their culture that if you are coming from a place of respect and wanting to learn, they are well ready to share with you. Yeah.
So long as you're respectful. I mean, you know, using stories and I mean, where was the Bible written originally? In 300, and that's all over the world.
Yeah.
To every culture. So why, you know, if I've got a story, this is a very interesting teaching story from this country or from this country, from this country. Well, these stories are often written down in books. They're meant to be shared.
I think it goes
That
back to
kind
what
of
you had
idea.
said earlier about, like, if you're going out and seeking to learn about something, then that's for that culture to decide, not...
There is the thing, do I read a couple of books by maybe credible authors, maybe not, and then I decide, always make candles, I'm so good at it, and I'm going to slap this face of this deity on my candle and perhaps take away the ability for somebody else to actually profit from their own cultural standpoint, and I've just westernized it. And I mean, we have this here, but this is a global thing.
Yes.
I mean,
How many prosperity candles with ISIS on it have we all seen?
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Something like that.
they are created in some country that doesn't revere ISIS, right? So
Yeah.
you know, it's a global thing, but it can be part of your personal practice to be authentic and to be respectful of that yourself in your growth.
A lot of people don't seem to understand that there's a very large difference between the urban outfitter selling white sage and dream catchers versus a local artist doing that who may have some sort of connection to that community, maybe has permission from that community. You don't know everybody's story, but everyone just sort of assumes they know. A little while ago, I was in Truro, actually. I was looking for pipe tobacco, because it's really hard to get in Halifax right now. And so I stopped at one of those tobacco stands along the road, and I stopped in, and of quickly discovered that the natives in the area have very traditionally moved from tobacco to selling marijuana because it makes more money. They didn't have any tobacco. But I noticed that they were selling a lot of white sage. And I said, well, that's interesting that you're selling white sage. And she's, yeah, like you could buy it, you could burn it. It doesn't matter to us. You can't perform a smudging ceremony because you don't know the ceremony, but you can still burn it.
And it still has usefulness, but don't assume that you have.
Yeah, don't assume you have the knowledge to do this ceremony, which you don't.
Yeah.
But using a basic, burning a herb or incense or resins to use for, cleansing and this and that.
Oh, that's a worldwide thing. That's not. That doesn't belong in
anyone
culture.
can do that. I mean, I'm not qualified in any way to do a native smudging ceremony.
But sacred smoke is
a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Smudging in quotation marks for cleansing purposes, and everyone does that.
And we, as a grove, we've changed all our written material from smudging to seining. Yeah, it's a Gaelic word meaning pretty much the same thing.
Say the word again, please.
Seining.
Seining?
Yeah.
SAIN.
Oh, nifty. Never heard that word.
But I have seen I've seen some interesting work on language. There is a European Indo-European word smojin or something like that. So cultures interweave and people share things, and you may not know the details of somebody's practice, but there's so much interwoven, it's hard to extricate.
Right.
It is very, very interesting topic. On the note of, if anybody tells you you only read the books that we tell you, don't read these books, don't talk to these people, our way's the only way, or another biggie is, and it used to be really popular, really common, was, to receive your initiation, you have to literally do the great rite with the high priest.
Yeah,
That's
a big issue.
I know it seems incredible, but I swear I have seen all of this happen back years ago.
Wasn't there a crazy church out west in Canada that had a big issue with exactly what you just said?
Mm-hmm. Or yes, you're in my coven and I am the high priestess, or I'm the high priest, and if we happen to be at a party at somebody else's house, you have to wait on me and bring me your drinks. That's another one.
We used to have that problem here.
And so it's sort of like that really gets me. Now, that said about, books you can use and what products you can use and only burn this and do that, I would never say to anybody who asks me, oh, should I read this book? You read anything you want. I have, however, said this. You go right ahead and read it. You might get more out of it if you read these first.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you are right out of the gate and you want to read something that might go slightly over your head because it's like, no, it's a good book, read it if you want. But you know what? Maybe after you've done this and this,
you may enjoy it more.
You will get more out of it. You want to read, you go straight ahead.
In Druidry, we have something similar. It's like, no Druid should ever read the 10 Lessons of Merlin. It's the worst Druid book, and it'll take you on
I found that book at a secondhand bookstore, and very little about Druidry. It is literally the only book I have ever destroyed in my life.
Yeah. It is the worst Druid book, and any Druid will tell you, buy it and burn it.
Yeah, if you see
that is Druid's gatekeeping.
Now, Margot may remember there was 1 or 2 books going around back in the day. People were finding them secondhand. I know Vanessa wouldn't carry them in the store. People were asking for them. And I do know that there were several of us, if we saw these books somewhere, we bought them so that other people wouldn't.
Because you didn't want that kind of version of...
I have 1 or 2 of them.
You didn't destroy them. You just
no. I didn't. Like, this is how you rob a grave to get the nails out of the coffin. I'm not kidding. Remember that book? I've seen more than one book. This is how you kill someone. This is how you do candle spell for this. Another really great one. I got this one upstairs. It was, oh my gosh, I found it somewhere. Love spell. If you want this particular person, when you invite them over and you give them a drink, make sure you put your menstrual blood in it, because then they will be bound to you and only you. We saw these books, we picked them up.
Sounds like the anarchist cookbook. But
it was out there and people thought it was great. I'm like, I forget the name of that one, but you had all kinds of people asking for it, and we're like, no, we're not buying that.
That's what a lot of them are looking for after they watch like The Craft.
But no, and I know that
Disney
is,
crap.
I have personally done gatekeeping then.
Yeah.
It's like, you do not need,
Well, and
people
that's
do not need to be digging in graveyards to find nails.
that's sort of the next step in this conversation. There is gatekeeping that's required, especially in paganism, with a wide variety of white supremacists knocking at our door constantly.
Oh,
Where
because
we have to tell certain people, no, bugger off. You're not allowed to use these symbols. You're not allowed to be a part of our culture.
I think the Asatru community is having a big deal
Oh,
with that right now. The
they-
whole Norse.
They probably had, I feel for anyone of that faith, because they have had a rough go for the last 20 years. Various symbols being appropriated, and as you've said before, the Muggles not understanding this, because a lot of groups online will post symbols that are used in hate groups without the communication of that these symbols are still used in modern paganism, but they just label them as hate symbols. There's all sorts of runes that are, if you look it up online, you're almost targeted as a white supremacist immediately without understanding that those symbols have other meanings.
Well, that's not the first time that symbols from one religion
Of course,
have
yeah.
been bastardized to mean something completely different by
Yeah.
someone else.
Well, the swastika being the most famous
Exactly,
one.
yes.
It's funny because nerdy, like if you play Pokemon Go, and if you have anyone on your friend list from China, you can send each other like things. In China, almost every temple has a swastika on it.
Well,
So I probably get 7 or 8 swastika pictures a day from various people in Japan.
I had a girl who lived with me from China, and one day she was leaving out the door with her swastika earrings on.
For good fortune.
Yeah, it was. And I said to her, you can't wear those here. She's like, what do you mean? I said, do you know what this symbol is? Oh, it is this. And you go to the temple and you pray and you on and on. I said, no. And then I talked about it. She says, oh, really? Because she was vaguely aware of it being used as a Nazi symbol. She was only 20 years old and all of that. But to her, that
But
was
it's
just...
also our assumption that
Yeah.
our cultural take on something
Mhm.
is going to color everybody else's.
Yes.
I did say to her, I said, if I were you, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I said
Be
because
prepared.
it would. I said you could get people saying very unpleasant things to you, or even and people coming up to you. She said, "Really?" She was very, very surprised, and I said, "Yes." And it was very interesting. And once I was in, when the art gallery had the mummy or the Pompeii or whatever, and there was this almost like it was like a pottery piece, and there was a swastika on it, and it was a couple thousand years old. And someone said, "Why is there a swastika on that?" And the tour guide in the museum said, "I have no idea." And I said, "I do."
I
It was, and that symbol went from China right through to the Balkans as a
First
protection
Nations
and
people
light
here
There-
around the
all
Great
that.
Lakes. First Nations
I could just
people
do a
around the Great
whole
Lakes.
thing about the Atlantis theory. Have you guys ever heard of this? This is a different topic, and I'm not trying to change the topic, but there are various symbols and technology and tools that you'll find all across the world, and there's zero connection of why they're there.
Yes,
It's
that's
called the
very
Atlantis
interesting.
theory.
Well, even up in the northern part of Ontario, there's a town called Swastika.
It was a mining town.
It was a
And
mining
in
town,
the turn of the century, because I lived just not too far from there when we were doing our Back to the Land, at the turn of the century, everything Asian was late 1800s, early 1900s. The people were expanding and traveling, and people were in love with that culture.
Mhm.
And so they brought it back. And it's prosperity on a gold mine town.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
made perfect
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And they've gotten some blowback from time to time. But again, it's almost our myopia that we assume other cultures are going to
Mhm.
see the swastika in the same way we do because we have had this horrific experience with it in the West
It
and
is.
this horrific appropriation. The First Nations people around the Great Lakes area, there's stone carvings of that from there. Again, it's on Turtle Island, way
Well, isn't that interesting that they would have that? Native people, and the Balkans would have it. But then again, the theory we learned growing up, that the people from China came over the
Mhm.
land bridge, and maybe that symbol came with them. Maybe
Yeah,
that symbol
probably.
is that old, and the native peoples knew it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That just came in my head. That's an interesting question.
But yeah, so gatekeeping is definitely used in a sense to keep those people out of the pagan community, and that's a good thing. And gatekeeping is used to burn incredibly terrible books, which no one should ever read.
I have 2 or 3 of them upstairs still. And oddly enough, we went through this phase of finding them in secondhand bookstores. People did. We were buying them. And and here I am. I suppose I'm contradicting myself. Oh, if you want to read that book, you go ahead. But some of them were just not nice.
Yeah.
And we did that at the time. I guess we felt it was the right thing to do. Anyway.
Again, I think earlier, and this would be another topic, but about the threefold law and all those sorts of things. Some of those things, there was a lot of backlash if you were in this alternative religion in the, the 50s, 60s, that sort of thing. And so you almost had to be a purer than pure.
Yeah, it had to be the real serious white witch, the white witch.
Yes.
Kind of
So there would
black.
be that aspect. So yeah, no, witchcraft is never used to harm anybody, and no, you never do this and you never do that. And then of course you go back in cultural and you look at various tribal peoples through that witchcraft and Druidry and various Western European traditions come from. Oh, people did all sorts of horrible things with their witchcraft. And they did it from places of very often having zero power and having no way to even the score. Anyway.
Well, even in many ancient religions, human sacrifice and animal sacrifice and this and all these things was extremely common.
Yeah.
Extremely common. All right. Well, look, thank you everyone for tuning in. And you can certainly, if you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you on the Facebook page, 3 Witches and a Druid. And our next topic of conversation is going to be about taking money for services in paganism. That is our next topic of conversation.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll look forward to talking to you again soon. And again, contact us anytime. And until next time, everyone, merry meet,
Merry part.
and merry meet again.
Blessed be.
This has been 3 Witches and a Druid podcast. Thanks for listening.